Working at home. Hey, it happens more and more. People work at home. They telecommute into their office, their place of work. Well, what happens if you get hurt at home while you're working? Workers' compensation is supposed to cover you if you have an injury arising in and out of the course and scope of your employment. But what happens if you're there at home? Workers' compensation cover you? Well, that brings us to this week's case. It involved a woman who was working at home. Her employer, frankly, just ran out of room in which to have employees work. It said, we'd like to have you work from home, so she said, okay. They bought the furniture, they bought the equipment. She's working there at home and telecommunicating into work. So she takes a break. She goes to her kitchen. She's making lunch. She hears a knock on the door. She goes to the door. It was a neighbor. It was a male neighbor who, unfortunately, assaulted her, beat her up pretty badly. She then brought a workers' compensation claim saying, hey, I was working at the time, I was simply taking a lunch break, and bang, this happened. Since it happened while working, I should be covered under workers' compensation. The insurance company said, no, we don't think so. We don't think so. We don't think so because there was nothing incidental in your work that required you to open the door. There was nothing that required you to be taking a lunch break in your kitchen. None of that had to do with your employment. Well, she argued, well, at work I would take a break. I would have lunch in the break room at the office. What's the difference? So the court considered this. It looked at this, considered both arguments, and after some reflection said, okay, insurance company, you're right. You're right because this wasn't arising out of her employment. The assault that took place was by someone who knew her, that was upset with her on a personal level, and it took place in her home. There was nothing that required her to open the door and let the guy in. There was nothing in her employment that caused this kind of assault to take place. It wasn't like the guy was mad at her employer and said, I don't like the kind of work you're doing, and beat her up. It was a personal vendetta. They said has nothing to do with your employment and has nothing to do with the fact that you were working at home. It could have happened even if you were not involved in working that morning. As a result, no workers' compensation. Now, we have to contrast this case to some other cases in which somebody suffers an injury while engaged in actual work for their employer while at home, such as they pick up a phone drops, hits them on the foot, something of that nature. Believe it or not, that would be covered. Of course that would be covered. So the question arises, when you're working at home, does the injury that arose occur out of your actual employment? Was something you were doing for your employer, or it was an incidental activity that had nothing to do with your employment and would be the kind of thing you'd be doing at home anyway? All right, we bring you this case this week, and we bring you cases every week so you understand how the law works. My name's David Allen.